Welcome to Self-Taught, where former foster youth, like myself, share our real-life experiences with sex, health, and life. Hosted by the Reproductive Health Equity Project, these are some conversations we wish we'd had earlier.
Hi everyone, my name's Tamar. I'm a member of the Youth Advisory Board, and we call it YAB at the Reproductive Health Equity Project, or RHEP. Today, I'm going to be here with another member of YAB, Cody, and Lonnell Schuler, program lead for Get Smart Before You Get Sexy at Black Women for Wellness. And we're going to be talking about all things STI prevention. So now that we're here today, Cody and Lonnell, I'd love if the both of you could share a little bit about your background and why you decided to be here on this podcast today and talking about this important topic.
Of course. So I can go ahead and get started. My name is Cody. So I wanted to be a part of this podcast today because about 6 years ago, I discovered that I had contracted syphilis, but it wasn't until about 3 years ago that my doctors found out about it. And it was 3 days after I found out I was pregnant. STI wasn't really anything that was on the forefront of my brain. It was kind of a shock for me, but it got to the point where it was putting my life in jeopardy as well as my daughter. So I've been a really strong advocate for STI prevention, primarily for youth.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lonnell, and I'm a program coordinator at Get Smart Before You Get Sexy, which is our comprehensive sex ed program at Black for Wellness. Black for Wellness is a nonprofit dedicated to the health and well-being of Black women and girls. And so our program understands that knowledge is empowering, and it's essential to understand and stay informed about sexual health and safe sex practices. So STI prevention is important to me because I come from a place where I've had to be fearful that of my health outcomes, like being from a former foster youth, someone who is queer, also low income. I feel like all of these statistically make me more susceptible to STIs. And also, I wanted to be here because I care. I think community care is definitely important because if we're not looking out for each other, then it's just ultimately a competition, you know? And so I love to empower myself and others with information that they can use to protect themselves.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think that's a really important thing you highlighted about how it's the community aspect of it. So that's going to get me right in. So I'd love to hear more about from you, Lonnell, like what is an STI? What are those outcomes? And like, how can the community come together?
Yeah, okay, for sure. So an STI, or a sexually transmitted infection, is an infection that's transmitted through sexual contact. So these infections can be caused by bacteria, viruses, or parasites, and they can be passed from one person to another during vaginal, oral, anal, or genital to genital contact, sex. And so, yeah, that's essentially what it is. Some of the most common STIs are, of course, gonorrhea and chlamydia. So both of these are bacterial infections that can cause genital and urinary tract infections. And so these often have no symptoms and can lead to serious complications if they aren't untreated. Some of the other STIs to look out for are HPV. So that stands for human papillomavirus. And so that's a viral infection that can cause genital warts, and it's linked to various cancers, such as cervical cancer. I feel like everybody knows about herpes, right? So that's a viral infection that can cause genital or oral sores or warts. And it causes painful blisters around the mouth and genital area during outbreaks. And so we like to say that, you know, people who have herpes can like feel an outbreak coming on through like tingling sensations around, you know, those infected areas. Syphilis, of course, is a bacterial infection that can cause a wide range of symptoms from sores, rashes, fevers, and fatigue. And then I think, I don't say the most important, but the one that has the most controversy is HIV, which stands for human immunodeficiency virus. And so this is a virus that attacks the immune system, leading to something that is called acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, or AIDS, if it's untreated. I mean, yeah, that was kind of my quick overview. And so what the community can do, of course, is raise awareness. And that is kind of the biggest thing that we can do because we know what happens. People have sex, and it only takes one time for someone to get an STI. And so if you understand that and kind of how to protect yourself, that makes a big difference from having sex and not understanding what can happen, what are some consequences from that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I mean, even me personally, I have a hard time understanding what an STI is versus, I don't know, an STD. I mean, are those two like synonymous?
And you are not alone in thinking that. I feel like people are unsure, but I think you could definitely use both interchangeably, STI or STD. I feel like STDs have like a worse connotation or vibe with them, but they mean the same thing.
Yeah, thank you for busting that myth for myself. I always heard the one, but not really the other until I started getting involved in advocacy work. So I think it's important to clear the air up about that, which leads me to my next question. Cody, I would love if you could dive in a little bit more about syphilis and how that impacted you mentally during your pregnancy and the other outcomes of it.
Of course. Yeah, it was definitely a surprise when they first told me that I contracted syphilis. I had absolutely no idea what it was. They weren't searching for it. It was just routine blood work because I was pregnant. And that was when I found out that it was an STI that you have to do blood work for, not just a urine sample. And that was the first exposure that there was separation. I was doing urine tests and I thought that was everything I was supposed to be doing. But it was hard. I remember I had gotten basically like a several weeks of just really random medical issues, and I was getting tested for strep. My ears were affected, my eyes. I mean, everything was just being attacked at a nervous system level. And it was scary. I went to like 4 or 5 different doctors and no one could figure out what was wrong with me. The last symptom I had was a rash, but it wasn't your typical rash. Like, it doesn't itch or burn. You don't feel it on your skin. It's just visible. But after a couple months, that even went away. It was an STI that was really undetected. I mean, I went without knowing for 3 years that I had it. And I suffered permanent neurological damage in my eyes. So now when I get migraines, my eyesight completely goes blurry. Thankfully, it's easily reversible as long as I take pain meds. So I got really, really lucky in terms of damage that was permanent. And with my pregnancy, it was really hard because, I mean, there's a lot of people who go through pregnancies and they do ultrasounds, and it's a really exciting time. You get to see your baby on the ultrasound. But for us, it was more, we had to figure out if she contracted it. It kind of took the joy out of the experience of pregnancy. Thankfully, my daughter was born healthy. She did not contract it. So we got really, really lucky. But it was scary. We had to really have those really scary conversations about termination because it can affect unborn children really severely if left untreated. So yeah, it was scary, but I'm very, very fortunate.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. I think that brings up a lot of things. For one, like, it's a blood test, right? Like, a lot of people assume that it's all just urine. I remember the first time I found out, like, there are STIs that have blood test requirements, right? And you're bringing up all these other impacts, like your eyesight being impacted, your unborn baby, you didn't know what was going to happen. And I feel like that's a lot deeper and it goes a lot further than just, treating the syphilis, right? And I'm sure there's so many people that go their whole lives like not really caring about getting tested. So I think that brings up a lot of awareness as to it's really important, not just for if you have an STI or not, but if you're going to be healthy or not, right?
Yes.
And I gotta say, like, when it comes to myths, the furthest I knew about syphilis was in the TV show Rain, when they get syphilis and then they go crazy. So it's like there's a lot of misconceptions in media that we might see every day and not realize it. So thank you, Cody, for sharing that. And Lonnell, I'd love if you could go into it, right? Is there anything, that got brought up for you about the myths and common misconceptions?
Yeah, like as you're thinking of that, I was thinking of just some myths I heard about syphilis. So when I was in this foster home, I really had a dog. I was three-letter dog named Bouncer, and I used to like let the dog sleep in my bed. And the lady would be like, "Yeah, like that's how you get syphilis, you know." And I was like, "Huh?" And I was like, wait, from having a dog in my bed? Like, wait a minute. So I remember I used to like, I was so scared that I would close my door at night so he wouldn't come in. And I felt bad because I would hear him like scratching at the door, and I'm like, I don't want to get syphilis. And I just felt that's my only like, and I was like in sixth grade when this happened, but like that was how I thought syphilis happened from like, getting it from being in close contact with the dog. But that's just one that I kind of grew up with. But like doing this work, I hear a lot of myths kind of all the time. I think one of the ones that I try to undo a lot is that STIs are for like bad or dirty people. I feel like you hear that a lot, or when somebody says it as STI, people are like, oh, like they're dirty, like that's what that you expect. Or even like when Usher came out that he had herpes a couple of years ago, people were going into the comments like, oh, like that's nasty, that it made it seem like the STI reflected on him personally. And I'm just here to say that, yeah, no, anybody can get an STI because they don't discriminate. So like rich and famous people, low income people, athletes, it's really important to understand that the best way to avoid getting an STD or STI is to really understand these myths, and to not have sexual contact, if possible. Understand like where people are real, have urges, but those are like, yeah, that's one that I hear a lot. It's just it reflects on the cleanliness of a person. Another one is like this is one that my brother told me, and I was like, okay, but he said like once you get an STI, you can't get it again, and I was like, okay, now some STIs you get, they're not going away. Like HIV, herpes, you have those for life. But for those that can be treated, you can for surely get those again. Like chlamydia and gonorrhea, once you get it, you get treated, it goes away. If you come in contact with STI again, you're gonna get infected again. So that was weird. I was like, no, you still gotta use condom, because you could definitely get it again. I think the last one that I hear like more often, and this is I hear from like students a lot, and they ask me questions. They're like, "Can you get an STI from a toilet seat?" And I'm like, okay, that's because I have to think about it at first. I'm like, can you? I mean, if maybe it's a short amount of time between, but no, like the likelihood of you getting like an STI from a toilet seat is like so low that it's a no. And that's mainly because STIs are, like I said, transmitted through that person-to-person contact, so sex. And so STIs can't really survive on a toilet seat long enough for that to be transmitted to you. So yeah, those are some myths that I kind of heard that I'm like, let's move away from those, because then once you get away from myths, you can start talking about how to actually prevent these from infecting you, from impacting you, and move forward to having a safer, healthier sex life.
Yeah, I mean, that's funny you mentioned the toilet one. I vividly remember hearing that as well when I was in like middle school and being terrified of public restrooms for a good couple years, So I think that's a strange one, but maybe it's a little bit more common, than people would assume. And something you mentioned as well, like you said HIV, right? Like that's lifelong. I'd love if you could get into a little bit more. What does STI prevention look like for those who are LGBTQ? Like, there's so many myths that go around that. And obviously you can make a whole podcast on it, but, I feel like there's a lot of just, they get impacted maybe in a different way, right? Than some other people might.
Right. Yeah. And Get Smart does a lot of work as well to like undo kind of harmful stigmas that have been perpetrated through the years, and HIV is one that is very rooted in stigma, and it's really hard to undo because, like I said, it's really deep rooted. But I think that's the one that impacts gay men a lot. I don't want to say the most, but a lot, because people think that every time there's a STI or there's fear, especially with monkeypox, it's always, oh, it's gay men, or that's all something that happens to men who have sex with men. And it's like, if you don't do that, you're fine. And it's like, okay, no, like I said it right, STIs don't discriminate. Um, yeah, that's what I hear a lot is that HIV only, impacts gay people. Um, yeah, that's not the case. When in actuality for Black women, every time when new HIV cases come through, it's through heterosexual sex. And that's data from California. I don't know where folks are listening to the podcast, but in California, like for Black women, most of their HIV transmission comes from heterosexual sex. So I'm like, that's one myth that I'm like, it's definitely not true and it's harmful. Because if you're thinking that, oh, I'm not gay, I'm good, then you're not protecting yourself in the most effective way. Yeah, let me know if that answers your question. But I do think that gay folks are just more susceptible to STIs in general for a lot of reasons, from like stigma, discrimination. It's for me personally, it's very awkward for me to talk to my doctor about issues about my sex life. Just because like when I go to the doctor, there's so much. I go to the doctor maybe once every 2-3 years. So it's a lot to talk about. And they're like, yeah, like we're not gonna do all this in one visit. And I'm like, okay, all right. So I usually handle my like sexual health, sexual wellness through like clinical care. So like I like community-based clinics, like Out Here Sexual Health on La Brea. I'm in Inglewood. If y'all are in LA, I usually go there because they are real. And I don't feel like I'm a spectacle or I have to be judged when I talk about not being straight or or non-hetero things. It's always like, the doctor looks uncomfortable. And so, but we go to these clinics, they're like, oh, I got you. Like, it's just like I said, community vibe that I really enjoy and I really like feel supported and comfortable and like asking questions and going multiple times and calling again and asking for clarification for more information. And yeah, let me know if that's getting too long, so I can talk all day.
Yeah, no, that's really great, that you're so passionate about it. I actually, have heard obviously the same stigmas, and someone I knew in high school, not personally, but they went to my high school. One of them, they had contracted HIV and they were a woman, right? So and I remember I was recently telling this story to a couple of my friends who are, in the LGBTQ community, and they all were just dying because they're like, finally a woman, right? Like not, a man who's spreading it. And I remember like that actually got me thinking, like, that's crazy that so many people, are impacted by that. And I can't even imagine how that would impact your medical care too, right? Like you said, you don't want to talk to your doctor about this. Like, I don't want to talk to my doctor about it either. So I can't even imagine if you have a physician, right, who's not inclusive and they're not treating you with kind words and actions. So thank you for talking about that, right? You can never talk too long about something of that importance.
And no, thank you, because I think you brought something for me as well. Like I do this work a lot, and I remember this HIV positive Black woman was talking to me, and she was like, yeah, like when I caught this virus, I thought I was gonna die. And so she was telling me how she tried to like hide that by using drugs. So she was like, if I overdose, then people won't know I died from HIV. And that was like so heartbreaking. So I'm like, man, like I wish like you had a community of support and love that would have supported you and let you know that it's okay, that you're not a diagnosis and that you can make it, you can survive and thrive with this. But I was just like, yeah, like she was telling me how she was in high school when it happened. And this is why like I do this work, because people who are vulnerable, they need this help. They need like education, information, and just support, somebody to talk to. And so I'm always thinking like, if I'm impacted, there's people who have even less privilege than I do. Which is why I'm like, okay, like if I'm already like down bad, I know there's people that are worse off than me, which is why I'm like, how can I help? So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. And like, Cody, do you have anything to add to like, I thought syphilis was this crazy, 1700s, STI. Like I didn't realize that it's still so rampant, like, and out there, and like how we can be safe about it. So have you heard any, myths that you could tap into?
Yeah, it was funny because I remember there was this one movie that I had seen as well, and I even when I was watching the movie, I didn't know it was syphilis related, and he was just going crazy, and then just all of a sudden dies, and that's what I thought syphilis was, and it was the only reference before I actually got information from my doctor about it, and it, yeah, it was interesting, and not reliable information. To say the least. But yeah, it was kind of funny hearing like because I had this misconception that STIs are also like make you dirty because I was under the impression that like they're permanent, like all of them are permanent diseases, and that's not the case. And like I had always thought that it was rare. Like when I was a kid, I would always say like never gonna happen to me. Don't have to worry about it. It's just like the likelihood is so small, and then all of a sudden I have an STD or an STI, and it kind of just blew me away a little bit. But yeah, they are not necessarily rare. And one of the things that I had even learned in just other conversations is that even with syphilis, there can be like emergency outbreaks where now they're requiring people to get tested regardless, if they're even on the lookout for that. So it's not rare enough that situations like that do happen to where the public health systems have to kind of up their antics on getting people tested for that. And one of the other myths that I've learned is birth control does not protect you from STIs or STDs. I've been in a lot of situations where men are very, if you let them know they're on or you're on birth control, it's very, oh, we don't need to use protection. But protection is still needed for those situations for STIs because, I mean, like I had learned the men that I was having sexual intercourse with were not being honest with me. And that's how I ended up in the situation I was in and not knowing about it for 3 years. So having those conversations and still using protection, regardless if you're on birth control, is really, really important. And another thing that is a myth is that STIs are all the same. They are not. Some are treatable. I was very fortunate, and syphilis is treatable with penicillin. But of course, obviously not all are. So it's safe to go into it and not assume that, oh, even if I get an STD, it's fine, I'll go get treated. There are some that are not treatable. So to make sure that you're engaging in as safe sex as possible is really, really important.
Thanks, Cody, for saying that, like, all STIs aren't the same because, they aren't. I think the main differentiation is the difference between treatable and curable. Curable are those STIs that if you take antibiotics, you take medication, the infection will go away. So that means you will no longer have it. Versus like treatable are those infections that do not go away, but can only be treated. So like you can manage the symptoms through medications. And so those are really easy to remember because they all start with H and they're all like viral infections. And I think like once you get to science, I don't know who's my science folks, but I was very interested on the science side of things. Viruses are harder to, I would say, get rid of, right? So like a virus in your body, it uses your cells to do what it needs to do. So like when medicine antibiotic comes through, it's not getting them because it's recognize it as like a bacteria or foreign, entity in your body. And that's why viruses are harder to cure. And they're always going to be in your body, but you can manage those symptoms because like once you have them in your body for a minute, they're going to start creating, bacterial infections. And that's what the medicine is managing. But you're always going to have that virus there.
Yeah, thank you for sharing like the differences between, which ones are more manageable and which ones, you can cure, but keep in mind, like you mentioned earlier, you can get them again. So that brings me up to my next question. I want to ask you, how can people keep themselves safe, right? Like how can they also encourage safe sex between them and their partner and their own community?
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like this is not like revolutionary information, but it's something that it takes habit building, so you want to make these habits so that it doesn't feel foreign or uncomfortable once you get in the, once you get there. And so that is, protect yourself by communicating. One, with your doctor, like they can help you to manage some risk factors, help you get connected to resources through referrals, medications, and also just answer questions that, you tried Google and it wasn't too clear what the answer was. And communicate with your partner. So like understanding what your boundaries are and open up the space for honest, non-judgmental communication. If somebody feels judged, if they feel like you're going to run away or, rebuke them in a sense, they're most likely like, going to say what they need to say to get you to stay, And so leave a space like, hey, I am not judging. This is just me. This is what I'm about. What are you about? And so not leaving that conversation like open and feeling the flow and vibe. I'm a very like big energy person. If energy's off, I'm like, I'm gonna have to say it. I'm gonna have to talk about how the energy's off and but yeah, just making sure you're comfortable, make sure your partner's comfortable, you communicate your boundaries, any like no-goes, any red flags. That's the big one is communication. Testing, right? Regular testing, I feel like everybody tells me to get tested, and it's really hard to find the time to do that. But if you are sexually active, it's recommended that you get tested pretty regularly. So I would say once every 3 months, once after every new partner. And that's just because some STIs don't have symptoms, right? So you wouldn't know until you had that test. And that goes for your partners. So if they're like, oh yeah, trust me, I'm fine. I see no sores or scratches. Okay, but what did the test say? Because I believe you, but there's really no for sure way to know unless you get those tests. And yeah, those are like my main ones. I can talk about it all day, but as long as you're communicating, as long as you're getting tested and protect yourself through condom usage, that's the to go pack. You got it. You got you to do. Yeah. Do you have any more to add? Let me know. But I thought I missed a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely, reflect on a lot of times when I was trying to have these conversations, with like my doctor, for example, and the only thing they were worried about is if I was using birth control because I had a kid so young, right? But flash forward, I was 6-year-old now and don't have another baby, never have, gotten pregnant since then. But I've had a lot more partners, between then and now. So it's kind of like interesting how the healthcare community is so focused on preventing pregnancy, especially like with young women, and maybe a little less focused on like the STI prevention, right? Which brings me into my other question I wanted to ask you. I know that we didn't really get into it, but I've heard of PrEP out there, right? What does that look like? I don't really know how that works. Do you know any facts about it?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought it up. PrEP and PEP are two kind of therapies that will help you if you come into contact HIV, and I'll explain how. So PrEP, which stands for pre-exposure prophylaxis, that is if you're in a relationship with someone who has HIV, you will be taking PrEP pretty regularly so that you will protect yourself from HIV. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So PrEP is for HIV negative folks who, like I said, are dating someone or who might come into contact or who are at high risk. So they have unprotected sex regularly. They want to be on PrEP because that's the way to make sure that you don't acquire HIV. PEP is post-exposure prophylaxis. So that's if you have unprotected sex and you're worried that you might have HIV or come into contact with it, you want to get on PEP as soon as possible. And it's kind of like the HIV Plan B. I don't, like the emergency kind of wait, like the condom broke, or you had sex and after they were like, well, I did have STI scare. You want to call your doctor as soon as possible. You can call a clinic, and if it's within 72 hours, you can get that medication, and it will lower your chance of getting HIV.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. I had no idea about the one versus there's actually two, right? Like you mentioned, there's the more scare kind of Plan B version. So thanks for talking about that as well. My second question I had was, are there any like at-home treatments that we can do, right? Like some youth might not be comfortable going and seeing their doctor. They might not have access, right, to going to a clinic. Maybe they don't have transportation. So what can they do at home?
Yes, that's a good question because, like, people are, you want them to be comfortable and to feel non-judged, and that might be the best places at home, right? And so APLA has swab and chill kits, right? And so these are tests that you can order at your house. Has swab kit, you swab the inside of your mouth, and then you can mail it back, give your test results. Don't think no, so KNOW has vaginal test kits that they'll mail out to you as well. So those are like two options, the vaginal and oral option. But yeah, you can, I'm sure if you Google like local clinics and call them, they'll be able to mail you or direct you to an option where they can mail a test to your house. I think that does not include like blood tests. You would have to, or like blood tests have to go in, but like vaginal, oral, you can definitely get those mailed to your house, take them from the comfort of your home, and then mail them, and they will let you know your test results.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I also want to ask you, Cody, what are some, issues that have come up in your life, right? Like, have you ever had a hard time with partners respecting, your maybe new boundaries since you've contracted it, and experienced all that pain, in pregnancy? Have you ever had a hard time setting those boundaries with a partner or, suggesting that they get tested,
So it was actually kind of interesting because I've remained with my partner since I discovered that I had syphilis. He's the father of my daughter. And yeah, that was when we found out together that I had it. He had to start getting tested. He had to go through the penicillin shots as well, just as a precaution. He never contracted it, so we were very fortunate on that regard. But yeah, he was very understanding. It was very nice because even when I felt that I was dirty, he didn't portray that feeling towards me. And I mean, he was very understanding of, I didn't know. I mean, there was only so much I could do because I did not know. But yeah, it is definitely important to have boundaries. I learned that several years ago because I discovered that I had contracted it because I was engaging in transactional sex when I was homeless. I was homeless in and out for about 3 to 4 years. And one of the ways that I was able to find a place to sleep was engaging in transactional sex. And it was really hard because there wasn't a lot of choice in that. If I said no to whoever I was with, it was okay, well, now you're going to go sleep on the street and we don't care. So it was really hard of just not having the choice to really say no. But one thing that I learned over time was just having the conversations beforehand, like before you're in person, because typically like when you're in person, there's a lot of the energy, there's the vibes, you're more susceptible to the pressure versus if you're having a conversation about it beforehand, you can kind of feel those vibes. Are they respecting what you're saying and the decisions that you're choosing? And just make it really clear, like what your expectations are. And like, if this is like, we're going to use a condom, it's not a suggestion. Like, if you're not on board with this, then we don't need to engage in this activity. But it's easier said than done, especially for being a former foster youth. I was very susceptible to just all of the persuasion and not really knowing what to do and just being afraid of saying no. So it is easier said than done, but just having that practice and creating those boundaries and having those conversations, because I really learned over time to watch for those red flags in the conversations I was having with people. And once I would see that, I'm like, nope, I don't need to talk to you anymore. I'm good. But yeah, that was my experience.
Yeah, that brings up a whole other thing, right? Like the risk factor for homelessness and then being system impacted youth plus homelessness, right? I feel like the two could be correlated. And, I'm really sorry you went through that. And I'm happy that you're here with us now, trying to change people who might still be going through those situations. And, that brings up like, Lonnell, like, are there any risk factors that you've seen, in your work about being in the foster care system and contracting STIs through situations like homelessness?
Yeah, for sure. And before I say that, I want to, first affirm Cody and say that I'm sorry you went through that and you are worthy. And, I'm glad that you are using that experience to like empower other people to make the most informed decisions. So I love that. I think one thing you were talking about that spoke to me is kind of that body autonomy piece, right? So we always have body autonomy, whether we know it or not, but understanding what body autonomy means makes a lot of difference. So like, I realized that growing up in foster care, a lot of things happened that I did not necessarily know were like sex or sexual contact. And I didn't necessarily know that I, had the power to be like, no, actually, I don't want to do this and we're not going to do it. And yeah, so I wanted to say like, for everyone listening, that body autonomy means that your body is your own. It doesn't owe anything to anyone else. And once you have the understanding, it's a lot easier to kind of set those boundaries or even just communicate them because you are saying it from a place of like self-worth, of a place of, this is who I am, and I don't want to like sell out who I am for like a moment or a relationship because, right, who you are is amazing. It's unique to you. So I don't want to say that before I moved on, but yeah. So your question about risk factors, that's one that hits close to home because like for me, I read a lot growing up, and I think what really scared me was when gonorrhea became more and more drug resistant. It was like, okay, so here are the populations that are at risk, and it was like youth, it was like Black people, it was like gay folks. I was like foster. I was like, wait, that's all me. Wait, and so I was like, okay. So all these factors made me more susceptible for getting STIs, but I didn't know why, right? Um, and there are a lot of reasons I found that out as like I'm doing this work now. So foster youth in general just experience more obstacles and challenges like disrupted family environments through placement changes, limited access to healthcare and comprehensive sex ed, inconsistent healthcare services. All of these kind of make you more susceptible for STIs and definitely impact our sexual health outcomes, and which makes it why it's way important for us to like understand what STIs are and how to protect ourselves. Sexual identity is another big one. So gay folks, LGBT plus individuals, like I said earlier, they experience significantly more stigma, discrimination, and access when they're trying to learn or receive medications or advice. So this specifically contributes to a higher risk of engaging in risky sexual behaviors and a lower rate of getting tested. And then last, I think, is a big one as well, is race and ethnicity. So yeah, folks who are minorities or marginalized are usually on the lower end of the social economics, ladder, which means that, they don't have the money. They don't have the social connections to like know the best doctors in town, which means that you kind of get the bottom of the barrel. You get what you kind of, it feels like you grapple or you fight to get, And I just want to say that everyone deserves like the best, most quality healthcare. And it feels like it's competition to see a doctor that cares about you, that will listen to you, and not judge you for who you are. And so, yeah, those are like 3 of the major risk factors that I was like, wait, that's me. But also there's people who have it worse than me as well. So let me know if that answered your question or if anything was like unclear.
Yeah, no, that totally answered my question. And there's just so much there, and so many groups are getting impacted in different ways, right? And like just from the information that's getting to them versus the quality of care they're receiving, and then those outcomes, kind of 3-part process. And Cody, like that makes me think of your story too, right? Like not only did you experience a difficult time when you contracted the STI, like before it too, right? Like the root of it was really emotionally, strenuous, and then going through it, and then the post care, I can't even imagine. So I think both, the story and like the information you both given today is really essential, to helping youth protecting themselves from, contracting it and how they can get help. And that kind of brings me to my last question, right? Like, what has, I want to ask Cody, like, what has your been experience with receiving care now, right? Like the current, like you're all healed up, like how do your doctors treat you? How can you ensure that, something like that doesn't happen again?
Yeah. So I actually now refuse to go to my primary care. She basically showed me she didn't really care. Because I mean, when she informed me that I had syphilis, and she didn't really take it serious. Like I took it upon myself and I went to the hospital because like we just found out I was pregnant, and it's like, okay, well, what is the treatment? She didn't really explain or even set up a next appointment to start treatment. So I just went to the hospital. They're like, yeah, no, if your doctor's not contacting you, you did a really good job coming here. And they set me up with appointments to actually go to the hospital instead, because with how high my titer was for syphilis, they said that I needed to at least do 3 weeks worth of penicillin shots. So that was the start of my treatment for that. And it's definitely helped me now, because even when I go to like Planned Parenthood, which I've had really good success with overall, I now am very like stern of I want to do a blood test. I kind of take, I guess, the power for myself instead of letting them be the ones to say, hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to do this? I take that and I'm like, I want to test for this. So it finding out kind of did give me a little bit of power back. And just even knowing that it's essential to ask for blood tests as well as urine tests. So now every time I do get tested, I make sure I'm doing both of them, not just what they recommend. But yeah, if I were to recommend any of the youth or people listening now, it's try and take that power back for yourself. Like when you go into the doctor's office, let them know what you want, not what they recommend. But yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people can attest to, hearing recommendations that might not fit for them and their needs. And really, I love how you're advocating for people finding the healthcare that fits right with them, right? And tying that into preventing things such as STIs. And Lonnell, I'd love if you could wrap it up by maybe you have any resources that you've come across. Are there any acronyms or testing locations that youth and listeners here today might want to know about?
Yes. So there are plenty of acronyms for like whatever you need to do. So like we're trying to communicate. I know there are acronyms to help you set boundaries and to communicate them with your partner. And so there are worksheets to kind of help you to like plan having that conversation. I know when you plan that in your head, like you plan conversations in your head, they never go the way you planned them. But sometimes writing things down, it's easier to kind of see why they're important to you and help you to communicate that with your partner as well. So I would say those live on like websites like Black Fathers website. I think Teen Source is a really good website as well. I always go there from like, let's see what's new. PPLA has a really great website as well. I'm glad you mentioned them. Because their website, they really do take large concepts and make them very digestible. So if you're looking for more information about PrEP and PEP, Planned Parenthood like has it laid out very well, and like where to go, what it means, how to take those medications if you get them. And so yeah, those are just some of the ones that come on top of my head. I would say it's really good to look at Teen Source because they have like their clinical directory where if you're looking to find a clinic that's close to you, you can easily search it in on their map, and it shows like really good clinics that are like local to you. And that's kind of how I found out about the clinic that I go to out here, sexual health. Yeah, I think that was
the
main ones, right?
Thank you for sharing that. for me, it's like we got to keep our pH right, and like knowing
Right.
keeping it that way. I just wanted to thank you both today for sharing both of your stories and your education with us. And, I can feel the passion through both of your words, and I know everyone listening today can as well. And I just wanted to add too, if anyone is looking for the STI and reproductive health in general, you can visit fosterreprohealth.org. There's lots of notes for resources, and I really hope that listeners, you tune in for our next conversation. Thanks for tuning into this important episode. There are some additional key points about condoms that I'm going to highlight for you since we didn't get them in the conversation. First, condoms work really well at preventing against sexually transmitted infections. They are in fact the only birth control method that can help protect against STIs. There are many types of condoms, but the most common ones go over a penis during sex. These are also called male condoms or external condoms. Just know that lambskin condoms do not protect you against STIs, only pregnancy. Internal condoms, which are sometimes referred to as female condoms, go inside of the vagina or anus and also work very well at preventing against STIs. Although they are less known, they can be very empowering for people and a great option for all. Dental dams can be used to prevent transmission of STIs during oral sex on a vulva or anus, and a condom can be used to prevent transmission of STIs during oral sex on a penis. You can find the helpful links in the show notes and resources, including videos on how you can use these different types of condoms. As we mentioned, but it's absolutely worth repeating, birth control prevents pregnancy, but it does not protect against STIs. If you're using birth control method, you'll want to make sure you're also using a condom to prevent an infection. PrEP will protect you from HIV, but it does not protect you from STIs such as chlamydia, gonorrhea, etc. If you're on PrEP, you should also be using condoms. And of course, make sure that you and your partner or partners are getting tested regularly. A good rule of thumb is to get checked every 6 months or whenever you have a new partner. If you have any questions, be sure to check the show notes or ask your provider.
Thanks for stopping by. To hear more and support our cause, like this video and subscribe to our channel, and check out fosterreprohealth.org for more resources.